You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Just like any other time, we have another show lined up for y'all. Today we have the honor talking to Jeremy Lipkowitz. He is a former Buddhist monk, a seasoned meditation teacher, and ICF-certified executive coach, helping high-achieving men overcome addiction and also to begin living a life that's rooted in integrity and fulfillment. I mean, he went from studying at Duke to sitting in silence for hundreds of days in the Buddhist retreat center, but not just stopping there. His life took a powerful turn when he confronted his own struggles. And we're going to learn a lot about that. It's so much detail that I won't be able to do justice and trying to unpeel all of it in 5-10 minutes. So I just want to jump right in real fast and say he's the founder of Unhooked Academy, and he's also the host of Unhooked Podcast. He's going to share about all his journey and what he's doing. And this is going to be a powerful interview, I can tell. So first and foremost, I want to say to you, thank you for taking time to be on the show today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great and happy to be here.
Kind of unpack for us what started the whole process. I mean, go back to Duke when you were in your studies and then you started to make some changes. Tell us a little bit about that whole opportunity and just that experience.
Yeah, well, it really goes back to kind of a moment of insight where, I had this one day of really realizing that my porn addiction was an issue. I realized that how much porn I was watching was actually really taking a toll on my relationships, my mental health, my life, in ways that I hadn't realized leading up to that point. And this was a huge turning point in my life where I started to realize that porn was just one manifestation of all the different ways I had addictions in my life, addictions to alcohol and drugs and external validation, addicted to success. So porn really opened my eyes to all the other things. But I had this moment when I was in school. It was actually before I went to grad school at Duke. I was studying at the University of California at Davis. I was studying genetics for my undergrad. And I had just graduated. I was sticking around for another year doing some research in one of the labs. And I had this day where I was walking down the street. It was a beautiful day, blue skies, sunny. My life was good. I had a lot of friends. I had, good grades in school, was captain of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sports team. So I had a great life. And I remember walking down the street and seeing these two attractive young women walking in front of me. And I remember my mind just being so consumed by lust, by this longing and craving, this sexual appetite. And I realized how much it had taken over my mind. It gotten to the point where every night I was watching porn for 1 or 2 hours. And I realized how much porn I just infiltrated, and that sexual craving, that lust had consumed my mind to the point where it was in control. I wasn't in control. And I realized in that moment also that lust was a state of suffering. In that moment, I didn't care about all the good things that were going on in my life. My friends, my family, my good grades, any of it. All I could focus on was wanting something I didn't have. And that was a state of emptiness and a state of lack. And so that sent me down kind of a big rabbit hole, looking into this question of what is happiness really about? What does it mean to be content, to be fulfilled, to live a rich inner life, to have inner peace? And that got me into some books on Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy. I started to realize that meditation, particularly mindfulness, was just a way of training the mind to be happy. It was looking at the things that really bring happiness to your life and cultivating those things. So gratitude, contentment, compassion, connection with community. We live in this kind of false idea that external things are going to make us happy. Once I get that girl, once I get this watch, once I get this much money, once I get this many followers, then I'll be happy. And it just doesn't work, And so that's one of the things I realized, and that sent me down a long path of meditation and mindfulness.
When you look at your personal journey of your recovery, what was it like for you to be in the middle of that process? And for those listening and watching, what did that actually look like for you? What were some of the things that you had to put in place in order for you to see yourself through to the other side?
Yeah. And so one of the things I'm just really passionate about now is talking about porn addiction recovery, because it's such a common issue. Porn addiction for men, women as well, but particularly for men, it's an issue we don't talk about enough, despite how many people it affects. I mean, it's one of these taboo issues. For me, going through my process of recovery, I had that moment of insight when I was at UC Davis. And I ended up, after that, taking some time off from school. Before I went to grad school, I ended up traveling to India. This is when I started going on these long silent retreats. So a lot of my recovery early on was focused on meditation. And I was very fortunate to be able to travel to these places where I could really disconnect and actually go deep into these practices. So my recovery early on really looked like a lot of meditation, a lot of mindfulness, and then also just really being mindful and cautious and attentive with my use of digital media and how I was getting online, and just really being thoughtful about it. You know, my stance on it is I don't have anything philosophically against porn. I'm not kind of coming from the stance that porn is a sin or porn is evil. My stance is, you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with watching people have sex on a screen, but it's the addiction that's a problem. And so for me, it's like just really being more skillful with my sexuality. And it's not just the porn. You know, part of my recovery was looking at my relationship with sexuality in general. You know, how was I using sex as a way to either numb or escape, or was I using it in a really healthy way, a way to connect with another person, really get to know them on a deeper level? So that's a little bit of what my recovery looked like, but it's not necessarily what I recommend for people who are figuring out they're having problematic porn use right now. I would say one of the most important things you can do if you want to get on a path of recovery is to get connected with a community, to get connected with a men's group in your area. You know, finding a men's group, finding a recovery group, finding some kind of community that you can connect with is really important.
When you look at neuroscience for a second, how does understanding how the brain works, and how does that help people heal from addiction, especially when they're freshly trying to start that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. Understanding the neuroscience was actually one of the most pivotal things for me in just realizing that I had a porn addiction. Because when I started to question happiness and I started to go down this rabbit hole, I remember reading this one book that was kind of a blend of science and philosophy. And there was this quote that really just blew my mind. It was from this neuroscientist, and it said, "Neurons that fire together wire together." And what that means is that the more you use certain neural pathways, the more you think certain types of thoughts, the stronger those thoughts and neural pathways become. So as an example, if you're always thinking thoughts of anger, if you're constantly angry, you're literally on a neurological level, you're strengthening the synaptic connections. So you're making it more likely that you're going to have angry thoughts in the future. You're making those kind of like superhighways in the brain. And that's just what we know now is called neuroplasticity, that what you do and even what you pay attention to changes the structure and function of the brain. Now, what I realized is that every time I was logging onto a porn website, I was strengthening the neural pathways of lust and craving and addiction. I was literally creating superhighways for lust. And that's why when I went out into the world, everywhere I looked, I was just full of lust and craving and desire. Now, the cool thing is that you can use that concept of neuroplasticity to heal from addiction. So if you say, okay, well, you know, craving is causing a lot of suffering in my life, I realize that what I want my mind to be filled with is gratitude or compassion. Then what you can do is simply train your mind. You can use those neural pathways intentionally to strengthen them. It's just like going to the gym. You know, it's like if you want to build a bigger bicep, you go to the gym and you do bicep exercises, and over time it grows, right? The same is true for thought patterns and mental states. Like if you want to be filled with gratitude, a lot of people get it backwards. They think if I want to be filled with gratitude, I should go get the thing that I want to be grateful for, right? Like once I get the Rolex, then I can be grateful. But they get it all backwards. Gratitude, you cultivate gratitude first for what you have. You can still have ambitions and dreams, and I want to get this job and I want to have this kind of wife or whatever it is. But gratitude is something that you cultivate from within. It has no dependence on what you have. And we know this is true. I mean, you can go to places where people don't have a lot of material wealth and find that they might be filled with contentment and happiness and joy, right? And it's not about what they have. It's about their relationship to what they have. And so this concept of neuroplasticity really shows us how to do this in a pragmatic way. It's not just wishful thinking. It's, yeah, if you do this, if you train your mind, you will see these results.
When you look at how shame is part of some people's process, if people are human, I think y'all be honest enough to say we, at some point in our life, feel shame. When it comes to living in that shame, what are some ways that you found ways to break that cycle of, I'm just in that cycle now where I'm just ashamed of the situation? How were you able to escape that part?
Shame is such an important topic to address when it comes to addiction, and particularly when we talk about porn addiction or sex addiction. You know, shame, for whatever reason, is incredibly high around these topics of sexuality. You know, for some reason, as humans, we just have a lot of shame when it comes to sexuality. It's one of the reasons that porn is a very taboo topic. Even though it's normalized and people can joke about it, very rarely do people have vulnerable conversations about their relationship to porn or masturbation or sex. I mean, even me saying the word masturbation is going to make a lot of people listening to this really cringe. You know, they're going to think, oh, that's a dirty word. We don't talk about that. Everybody does it, but we don't talk about it, right? And so it's this very interesting topic where there's a lot of personal shame, but there's also a lot of societal shame. You know, we just, for some reason, want to sweep it under the rug and not talk about it, despite the fact that not only is it very natural to us, things like sexuality and masturbation, it's also one of the most beautiful things about being a human is our sexuality. You know, being a sexual being is a beautiful part of being alive. So it's this weird place where there's a lot of shame mixed in with the fact that it's a very primal drive. And when you're talking about porn addiction, a lot of guys feel very heavy sense of shame around their addiction, around just the fact that they watch porn. And what's really painful is that can exacerbate the addiction, because the message that shame gives us is that there's something wrong with you, that you are broken, you are unlovable, you do not deserve to be part of the group, that if people knew the truth about you, they would shun you or kick you out of the community. That's the lie that shame tells us. And so when you're feeling shame around something, it makes you want to isolate and hide and not be vulnerable, not tell the truth, live a secret double life. I mean, this is why porn so often causes guys to live like a double life. They hide it from their partner, they hide it from their loved ones. So overcoming shame is critical when it comes to recovery. In terms of how to overcome shame, the absolute best way, like the number one thing you can do to overcome shame, is to be in a safe space where you can talk about what you're feeling ashamed of, and you can be received with non-judgment and compassion. This is why men's groups are so important. You know, intentional communities where you can share what you're feeling and not be feeling like you're a weirdo. And, you know, I see this all the time with the guys in my community when they come into these communities, and for the first time maybe in their life, they talk about how they're struggling with porn, and they get met with looks, you know, around the room. In our case, it's a virtual room, but people just nodding and saying, yeah, you know, we get it. and it's normalized. It's like, hey, you're not alone. That feeling of you're not alone in this, that's the thing that heals shame. To realize you're not the only one, you're not a monster, you're not a pervert. One misconception a lot of people have is they think if someone has a porn addiction, it means they're a pervert. It means they've got some crazy sexual deviance. Most of the time, a guy acting out with porn addiction has nothing to do with his sexuality. It developed as a coping mechanism when he was 7 or 8 years old. It developed as kind of a numbing out mechanism. And it simply just kept going and developed onward from there. And it kind of took over his life, but it's not actually about his sexuality. It's just an escape mechanism. And so for a lot of guys, it's not even really about that. It's just, okay, this is the way that I numb out, deal with my emotions, escape. And so it's kind of blown up from there. But overcoming shame is really important, and getting connected with community is probably the best thing you can do.
Once again, you listen to I'm Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest, Jeremy Lipkowitz. My next question will be is, when it comes to making daily habits, a lot of times people, they need to have some kind of structure for them to follow through. But also, that key thing is action. They have to actually start doing things. For you, what did that look like for you in recovery mode? And also what you notice with your community, what some of the things that they're noticing in the process of recovering when it comes to what kind of habits are they trying to maintain and staying active with that journey?
It's a great question. A lot of people get this wrong, that one of the biggest mistakes people make in porn recovery is thinking, okay, if I can just put all my energy into trying to stop watching porn, then I'll be able to recover. And the truth is, you have to actually focus on the rest of your life if you want to recover from porn. What I mean by that is, you have to get out and exercise. You have to eat well. You have to sleep well. You have to focus on healing your relationships. It's all the other things in your life that you need to address if you want to address your unhealthy relationship with porn. Because the reason you have that addiction, and this is true for any addiction, is that there are things in your life that are out of alignment. Your sleep, your exercise, your relationships, your career, your purpose. It's when all these things are not in alignment, that's when you reach out to escape, because you want to escape some fundamental pain. And we know this is true. There's a really famous experiment known as the Rat Park experiment. Are you familiar with the Rat Park experiment? Have you heard of that before? I'll explain. It's a beautiful experiment. They were studying the effect of addiction back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because they were having all these soldiers coming back from wars or coming back with addiction, and they realized they needed to study it. So they were studying the effect of morphine on rats, and they would give these rats water laced with morphine. And they found that the rats would sit there and drink the morphine essentially until they died. They got so addicted that they would just forget to do everything else, and they would kill themselves just drinking that morphine water. And this one researcher then had an interesting insight. He said, well, these rats are living in these kind of horrible environments, these cages. They don't have other rats to play with. It's not a natural environment. What if we put them in a more natural environment? What would happen? So they got them addicted to the morphine water, and then they put them in something called a rat park, where they had running exercise wheels and other rats to play with, and greenery and all kinds of things that are natural for a rat. They got them addicted to the morphine water and put them in this park, and found that the rats barely touched the water. They were having so much, like of a natural living environment. They were out playing with the other rats, going on the exercise wheels. And what this shows us is that addiction is only there when you are living an unfulfilling life. That if you are deeply fulfilled with your life, if you are happy, if you're living in the way you should be living, addiction has nothing to hook onto. And this is true for us humans as well. It's like, if we are living a life that we really love, then we don't need to escape from it, because that's what addiction is. Addiction's an escape. And so, getting back to this question of what are the daily habits, it's all the things we all know we need to be doing. It's like getting regular exercise, right? Eating food that makes you feel good, like not eating too much highly processed sugary food. It's establishing healthy social connections. Are you meeting with friends? Are you part of a community? Do you have some kind of purpose, something greater than yourself? I'm not a religious person, but it is important to have some kind of greater purpose in your life, something that's greater than yourself. So all of these things, are important. And so it's one of the things that I focus on for myself and my own recovery is making sure I'm exercising on a regular basis, making sure I'm being part of community, having social connection. And it's also what I encourage the guys in my community to do, to get outside, to go for a walk, to disconnect from their phone, connect with a friend that they haven't talked to in a while. It's all the things.
When you think about philosophy and you think about the word freedom, what does the word freedom mean to you today versus what it was in reality before you were in recovery process, not in process, but recovery mode?
Yeah.
What's freedom like, for you?
Great question. Freedom is a really important word for me, because an inner freedom in particular. And before I recognized I had an addiction, my thoughts on what freedom meant probably were, enough money to do whatever I wanted, and more kind of the outer freedom. But now, it's more about the inner freedom. And particularly, there's this phrase in Buddhism that's called unconditional freedom. And I love this phrase because it's freedom not based on the conditions of your life, not based on whether or not you have the girlfriend you want, whether or not you have the kind of clothes you want to wear, whether or not people are validating you or, people like you. You have a freedom from the inside, a deep, deep place of well-being and inner peace and contentment and groundedness. Like when you really are confident in who you are and know that you are a good person and know that you are living in alignment with your integrity and your values. And that's real freedom. You're not out there hungry, trying to grab onto things or trying to push away things that you don't like. You can be free wherever you go. Whether or not somebody blames you for something, doesn't affect your inner peace. You say, oh, no, like, I know I'm living a good life. There's this other concept in Buddhism called the bliss of blamelessness. And it's when you are living in, an ethical way, when you're living with integrity, when you're not causing harm to people or causing harm to yourself, there's a bliss associated with that feeling when you know you've done nothing wrong. You can walk down the street with your head held high because there's nothing you need to hide. You're not worried that, people are going to see what I was looking at online last night or see what's in my text messages. It's like, there's nothing you need to hide. And there's a real bliss associated with that because you can go anywhere. You know who you are. And that's powerful. That's freedom.
Well said. Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guests today. Jeremy, this is crazy how time flew by so fast, and I can't believe that we're already almost to a close. But I want to touch on what you do with your academy, because I think it helps make this full circle. What was some of the things that you've been able to recognize with your community and this academy, and kind of explain to the audience what some ways that they can benefit from this additional resource?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. One of the things I noticed since running this academy, since sharing my own story of porn addiction, is just how common this issue is. It is so common, to see porn addiction for men in our society. I mean, around the world, even. There, in my community, we have people from all over the world, and it's in some ways it's it's shocking how common this is, but it's also comforting, to know that you're not alone. It makes it easier to talk about. And a lot of the guys really start to heal when they get in community. And so that's one of the things I see is that, part of the Unhooked Academy community, there's a course that I have that teaches people about meditation and mindfulness and habit science and all of these things that you need to learn to overcome addiction. But the other component of it is really just the weekly call with the guys in the community. And that weekly call is so important. Just getting on the call, even if you have nothing to say, I tell the guys, even if you don't have anything to say or to check in on about, just show up and listen. And just listening to what the other guys are going through and hearing, the stories of struggles or the celebrations, the wins, we need that community. And that's one of the things I've really seen in the Unhooked Academy community is how powerful that is.
Well, once again, if you're listening to this and watching us online, we're talking to our special guest, Jeremy Lipkowitz, and he's the former Buddhist monk, seasoned meditation teacher, and also an ICF-certified executive coach, helping you who's watching and listening. You have opportunity to really tap into what he's saying. I think this was a really great, not just message, but I would say a wake-up call, because not enough men are even talking about this. Like you said, and how we discussed earlier in the conversation, this is something that we really kind of ignore it. It's like warning signs, if you will. When you get warning signs in the car, it's like, I'm going to make it. I'm right down the street. And what happens is we say that every day until it breaks down. And I feel like that's what it's like with this topic.
And I'd love to say something on that, because it's such a good point, that one of the things that I realized that, that got me hooked on that is that with porn addiction, the consequences are so small and so subtle. And so from one day to the next, it's easy to dismiss it and say, what's the big deal? It's just watching porn. But the problem is when you build that up over a whole lifetime, over 5 years or 10 years, those subtle changes, those subtle shifts start to really add up. It's like the ways that it affects your expectations of intimacy, your expectations of your partners, the ways that it slowly affects your dopamine system and your ability to take joy in little pleasures, the way that it affects your ability to focus. There's so many different subtle ways. And as you say, it's so easy to dismiss, and so many guys do. We just normalize it. Like, what's the big deal? I've been doing this since I was 7, 8 years old. We don't notice how it's changed over time and how it's actually really hooked us in. And so it is really important. This topic of denial is a big one. A lot of guys are in denial about this and saying it's not a big deal. But if they were to really look at it, they might realize, hey, this has gotten me into kinds of things that I don't really feel good about in terms of my values, my ethics, my integrity. Also, I might be hiding this from my partner. I might be kind of giving my sexual energy into porn and masturbation as opposed to giving it to my partner. So there's so many subtle ways. And, if anybody's out there listening to this, hopefully you can have the humility to really assess it and not get caught up in, society says it's fine, but to really say, does this align with my values? Is this the type of man I want to be? And then if you recognize, hey, I might not, this might not be healthy for me, to make a change. And one simple way, if you're questioning whether or not you have an addiction or a compulsive relationship to porn, try to go 30 days without it. If you can go if you say, I'm going to go 30 days without watching porn, and you can do it relatively easily, you're fine. Like, you have a healthy relationship with it. If it's a massive struggle to get to 30 days, chances are you probably only get to 5 days before you start to really struggle. Then you have a problem. It's not a free relationship you have with it. You have a compulsive relationship.
Really good educational stuff for our audience to hopefully not just gain some insight, but if someone, don't worry, I'm gonna redo that.
No worries.
Yeah. Turn this back on. I'm going to redo that. It's Growing Pains of the SLR, but I'm going to redo that. So if you're listening to this right now and you feel like this has given me some great insight, I hope it does. I think this is not just an important conversation. I think it's, like I said moments ago, it's a wake-up call for guys and women to just understand that this is something that we can talk more about. I love the idea that you have men on call having the opportunity to, if they don't feel comfortable talking, they can listen. I think that's a powerful thing. That's what this show is all about. We listen to guests like yourself to not just give these blueprints, but also give these really great insights on your personal journey and what you had to go through. Because a lot of times we get caught in the fluff and gets kind of like redundant and it's just a routine, it's robotic. But when we get right to what they say, the nitty gritty, when we get right to the point, right to the issues, the heart of the issues, that's when amazing things can happen. So I appreciate what you gave. I believe is a great gift for all men out there who feel like they want to address things or seek help. If someone wants to go to your website, tell them where they can find you and they want to start this whole process and looking further into your academy. What's the next step?
Yeah, I would say if this topic intrigues you, if you're curious learning more, definitely check out my podcast. That's the number one way. Just search Unhooked on any podcast platform and you'll find it. There's tons of free resources. That's the best place to get started. If you want to get connected with the community, if you realize you want support, then just go to my website. You can go to unhookedacademy.com or you can go to jeremylipkowitz.com and you'll get plugged in there.
But like always, you've been listening to Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Jeremy. Like I say to all my guests, I want to say to you, appreciate your time and thank you for being on the show, man.
Yeah, appreciate you for having me on.